Welcome, everybody, to Spirituality Adventures. This is a non-judgmental place to explore spirituality, and we're so glad you're here. This is a viewer and listener-supported podcast, so we greatly appreciate your support. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Be sure and like, share, and subscribe to any of the social media content platforms that you're using. And then if you go to our website, spiritualityadventures.com, you can make a one-time donation, or with a monthly subscription, you'll gain access to our bonus content. We greatly appreciate it. Thank you for tuning in. Welcome, everybody, to Spirituality Adventures. Today, we are excited to have Patrick Poe with us. Patrick is a filmmaker here in Kansas City, and I have to say you're my first filmmaker in Kansas City.
I'm honored
to interview. In fact, my first filmmaker of anything. So
I'm glad to be here.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me.
And Matt Cox, my videographer, said, hey, you should get this guy because, well, he's followed you and your career some, but also we saw where a podcast that you do was nominated by Pitch Magazine as the, the best podcast of Kansas City.
It was up to be one of the best podcasts in Kansas City. I unfortunately didn't win. We just learned last week we were not the winners, but it's happy to be nominated.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And the podcast is really good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's First Timers Movie Club.
Yes.
And we're going to get to that here in a minute, but because I've listened to some of it too, and I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
But first, let's just kind of get you introduced to my listening audience.
Yeah.
Tell us about like where you grew up and where you're from.
I am a KC native.
Yeah.
I grew up in kind of the Mission, Shawnee, Kansas area of Kansas City, but like I consider myself a KC native. Anywhere in that like giant greater area is KC to me. But yeah, that's where I grew up. I've been here my whole life pretty much. And
where did you go to high school?
I went to Bishop Miege High School.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did Catholic school all growing up. Started in Catholic grade school, St. Pius X in Mission, Kansas, which is no longer a school. It closed, unfortunately. Actually, I was the last graduating class, and we had a class of, I think, 6 8th graders. So very small Catholic school, and then Bishop Miege High School.
Yeah. And your family, you have brothers, sisters? I
have one older sister, and she's still here in KC.
Okay.
She's a stay-at-home mom. They've got 2 kids and a third on the way.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Nice. And what'd you do post-high school?
Post-high school, I had quite the journey. I call myself a college dropout, even though that's not necessarily accurate. It feels accurate. So I knew in high school that I really wanted to do something related to writing, acting, theater. Those were kind of my interests at the time.
Yeah. I mean, how did that start at a young age, that interest?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was a theater kid from birth, pretty much.
Did your parents put you in theater, or how did that?
My sister did dance early on. So I did tap, jazz, ballet, all that from the age of like 5 to 18 pretty much.
Whoa.
So I did have a big dance background, had a huge theater background.
Were your parents into that?
My dad and my parents are both, they love going to the theater, and my dad acted in some theater even when I was young. There's
like local stuff here?
Yeah.
Like what?
My dad worked with both the Wyandotte Barn Players and the like Kansas Barn Players theater groups.
Yeah.
And there's a story of me being probably like a 4-year-old kid, because we grew up going to the theater all the time too, and nearly walking into the prop of a boat. So the actual like the fins and all the prop of a boat. And I nearly walked straight into it because I was a clumsy kid. And my dad looks at me and goes, "Son, stop. You nearly hit the prop there." And I look at him and go, "Dad, that's not a prop. that's the real thing. Because I knew the difference between like fake theater stuff and that's a real boat. But then they'd explain to me that's also called a prop.
At the age of what?
Probably 4 or 5.
4 or 5. Yeah. Interesting.
So I grew up as a theater kid, definitely.
Wow. So you were immersed in it.
Yeah. I definitely even wanted to do film as a high schooler, but I didn't have a lot of friends. So like, that's how all my friends that did film in high school are like, yeah, I would get my friends and we'd come out and do film. And I was like, oh, I just kind of sat around with my camera and like my friends were all skateboarders. So I would film skate videos all the time.
Interesting.
I would just film people doing different tricks. And I thought at the time that I was going to edit it together and make a cool skate video and we'd be the next Tony Hawk, Bam Margera. There you go. That was the dream.
What year did you graduate from high school?
I graduated in 2010.
2010. So I'm just trying to think like the technology you were working with in high school with your cameras and stuff like that.
Early digital.
Okay.
So I grew up on early digital. In high school, we worked on some DV tape cameras. So that's like the high definition tapes that they had, the mini tapes. But that was the start of my filming. And then out of high school, the goal was to do some sort of theater or writing. I went to the only college in Kansas at the time that had a creative writing degree, which was Pittsburgh State in Pittsburgh, Kansas.
Oh, wow.
So
the gorillas.
Yeah. And my mom was a gorilla. She graduated from there. So I was like, oh, I'll do that thing. And then
Chicken Annie's and Chicken Mary's.
There's a whole few. They're both delicious. They're both great.
For those who are listening, these are fried chicken places that are famous in that part of the state. Right?
Rival fried chicken places.
Yeah, exactly. Mary and Annie.
Yeah.
Yeah, fun.
But going there as an English major, I was somewhat discouraged by the faculty at the time of pursuing creative writing because they didn't think it was a job and they thought I should get a degree that led to a job. So I changed my major to be a dual major in communications and English for secondary school education, to be a high school theater and English teacher. And I thought that sounded like a good job.
Okay.
But after a time of being there, I realized that wasn't the job I wanted. And I'm theoretically going to school planning what my job for my life is going to be. So I dropped out of Pitt State. I ended up going to Johnson County Community College, and I have Associate of Arts in Theater and Photography.
Okay.
So that's the kind of college story. But I do, when people ask, I say I'm a college dropout.
Yeah. Well, I'd heard from listening to your podcasts and different things that you had studied photography.
Yeah.
And then just listening to your podcast, it certainly sounded like you'd studied film a lot, whether you did it officially or just on your own. You know, you've become a film critic, film expertise.
Quite a connoisseur of film. There's a famous Quentin Tarantino quote saying, I didn't go to film school, I went to films. So, because he didn't go to film school himself, he just watches movies obsessively, and that's how he learned to talk and think in cinematic terms. And I've worked in 2 different video stores. I've got quite the movie collection, and from that, that's kind of how I learned most of filmmaking, besides being on set with people smarter than me.
Yeah. I've seen one of your sets with like, I've got books, you've got videos.
Yeah. My movie collection is taken over my home.
Yeah. My books can do that. Yeah.
But I did to get a little bit of space back, because a normal bookshelf is a little deep for a DVD. I have custom built DVD shelves I built myself.
Wow.
So all those shelves you see were built by me, so they would fit a DVD perfectly and be a height so that they would fit DVDs as easily as possible.
So then what do you do with DVDs and then Blu-rays and then now just streaming? And it's like I don't even have a functional DVD player right now.
It's crazy to me whenever I hear people say that, because I'm such a physical media person. Because I do love having that item, and people kind of discuss those items and those things as like somewhat totem of showing that you love a thing, even though there's no need to have that physical item, and like there's no need to have pins on my jacket that tell you all the things I love. But like those items are things that are precious to me because that idea or that story is so precious to me.
It's interesting because, you know, I wonder if that's a part of like the comeback of vinyl.
Yeah, I think so.
You know, because it's like tangible, physical. And I, like with books, you know, you can read all your books on digital.
Yeah.
But what I've found that I do that, like when I travel, I'll put books, you know, on whatever. But I found that when I read a book digitally, I don't have a sense of where the depth of it, where it's at in the depth of the book, where it's at on the page. And I actually have this weird memory where if I read something that I like I can remember, I can almost go to it. And I mean, this is from reading over 40 years of stuff.
Yeah, you got quite the collection of books.
I can pull a book and know it's about a third of the way through the book and on the right side at the bottom. Yeah,
and that gives you that physical memory of that book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I still tend to, like, if it's a book I really want to dig into, I buy it.
Yeah,
you know,
I'm similar.
Highlight it and all that.
Even if like I get a book from the library and I read through it, if I love that book, I'll want to go buy a book of the same one, even though I'm probably not going to read that physical copy I own. But that way I never forget that experience I had, because I think it's kind of a reminder of an experience. And I think that's similar with vinyl. It's an experience listening to it.
And then movies.
It's the same. Yeah, because I go see a lot of films in theaters still, because I love the experience of a theater. That's everything for me. Yeah. Do you have a favorite theater spot here in town? I mean, I always have to push the Screenland Armor. There you go. Because they're local. But I'll admit I don't always go because I'm cheap. Sometimes I'll go to a cheaper theater. But I love the Screenland Armor. And I'll push them forever and tote their amazingness. Yeah. I love Adam Roberts. But like that experience is great. I need to do an interview with you. You need to talk to Adam. He's great. The experience of going to the theater is great. But then if I love that movie, I still want to have a thing that reminds me of how much I love that movie. Also, as a filmmaker, I love special features. So that's the only way you can get those features is buy that Blu-ray. It's got all the behind the scenes interviews. It's got the deleted scenes. It's got the commentaries. And I do that on movies I love. Like I'll go through all of that bonus content. You know? I'll do it for movies I don't even particularly love, but I'm just intrigued about how they made it. Like there was one that just came out. I hate to rag on a movie because that's not what I do, but Suicide Squad, like the new one by James Gunn. So I haven't watched it yet. It just came out on Blu-ray. But I like that Suicide Squad. Yeah, and the series. Blu-ray just came out. It's got all these special features, and I'm like, well, that wasn't my favorite movie of 2021 or whatever. But I kind of want to see like their gag reel because I'm sure that's a bunch of fun. I want to see what they did delete. I want to know what James Gunn process was making the film. So I'll probably end up buying that Blu-ray. You know, I love Grandson. He did some of the music for the new Suicide Squad. Really? You know that song Rain? Yeah. And, you know, so I think two of the main cuts from that movie are from Grandson. And, and he's anyway, I love his stuff. So, but yeah, it's like, oh, cool. Yeah. Because I like Suicide Squad, and when they combined it with that musical, the music track on it. It's really, always cool seeing artists that you love collaborate in different ways. Yeah, exactly. So your wife is a partner with you, obviously, in pretty much it seems like everything you do. Yeah, definitely. Is what it appeared to me, because we don't know each other, but I've been, you stalked me on the internet. Yeah, exactly. That's what I've been doing. And so Lolo, yep, Lolo Loren is your wife. Yeah. And tell us about how you guys met and how you've become partners in crime. So she literally in crime. I just watched Mr. Lee last night, and I'm like, it'll happen still. Anyway. So she started making films herself, pretty much literally herself. So they were written, directed, and starring her, because she also had no friends. Is she a Kansas City gal? She grew up all over, because her mother is a writer and a spiritual teacher, and she's kind of nomadic. and her parents separated when she was young, and her dad came to Kansas City when she was probably, I think 11. This is her story, so I'm not certain, but she will claim generally Kansas City, Sandpoint, Idaho, and Florida as kind of the 3 places she grew up.
Interesting. But
so she knew some Kansas City people, and that's how obviously we ended up getting together, and then I'm what's kept her in Kansas City.
So you met through common friends?
Yeah.
And she wasn't living in Kansas City when you met, or?
So we first got connected actually when we were teenagers.
Okay.
And a girl I went to high school with was friends with Lolo through a local Shakespeare camp.
Huh.
So that's how they knew each other. And Lolo was already making films and doing all this really cool stuff on YouTube. And my friend introduced me to Lolo and her YouTube channel. And so I first knew of Lolo as this girl on the internet. And I watched all of her YouTube stuff. I watched all of her content. I was like, this girl's hilarious. She's so talented. She's amazing. And then we emailed back and forth a bit for a while of like, Lolo was like, I'm going to make this thing in Kansas City. Are you interested in like acting in it or helping out? And I was like, oh yeah, I would love to do that. And then that never happened. And we kind of met once in high school. And I was like, oh, you're cool. She's like, you're cool. And then we never talked again. And then after my first year of college, we re-met pretty much on a 48-hour film competition. So the goal is you get a prompt, you get like a line of dialogue, and you get maybe a prop in a genre you have to make a film in. And you've got 48 hours to write, produce, film, edit, and submit the film.
Wow.
And they were like, we need some help. And that same mutual friend that introduced me and Lolo back in high school reached out to me and was like, are you in Kansas City right now? Would you be interested in helping? And I was like, I'd love to help. And in that 48 hours, me and Lolo were the only 2 people that stayed up and worked on it from hour 1 to hour 48.
Wow.
Doing all the writing, the acting, the filming, the editing.
Interesting.
And after that, we kind of just became really good friends, and we were like, we love working together.
Huh.
So when she was like, I'm going to start my first feature film, I was like, how can I help? What can I do? So I was there for the first script meeting. We kind of discussed what would be like a script that was possible. Her and Zachary Weaver wrote it together. She directed it. I assistant directed. I helped with some camera stuff. We ended up editing it together, and that was the formation of IX Film Productions.
Awesome.
And that film was Intermission.
Yeah, so cool.
Yeah.
That's wild. So IX Production is your film's company.
Yeah, we
basically.
were IX Film Productions, yeah.
And it looked like you started in 2012. Is that
That's
about
kind
right?
of what we think.
Okay.
It's because that story is so kind of ambiguous of like, well, was it started at the 48? Probably not. We didn't call ourselves IX yet. Was it started when we first talked about Intermission? Maybe. I don't know. But it definitely existed by 2012.
Yeah. Okay.
We were a thing, and we called ourselves that by 2012.
Yeah. So and you can go to YouTube for those who are listening and look up IX, like Roman numeral IX Production. And you've got, if I remember right, like 200 and some videos on there.
We have a lot. Yeah. So if you go to youtube.com/IXFP, that'll take you directly to our page. We've got a ton of podcast episodes of both First Timers Movie Club and our older podcast, Indies on Indie. We've got at least probably 20 short films and sketches. We did a comedy special series of Kansas City comics called Laugh KC, which is just these beautifully produced stand-up comedy specials of all sorts of different comedians from Kansas City, some who've moved away and done other things since then, but we've got that. We have trailers for our feature films. We have all sorts of, there's a lot on there.
Yeah. I didn't get to the comedy stuff, which I need to do that. But I did watch. So tell me the difference between a sketch and a film short.
The terms are somewhat ambiguous. So the way I like to define them is a sketch takes place in one room, one location, one scene. And a short film is a full story arc told through multiple scenes, probably in a short amount of time. Generally, a short's under 40 minutes. I like to keep mine under 15. But a festival, say about under 40 to under 60 is a short. Above that is considered a feature. Once again, I like to call a feature an hour 20 to 2.5 or whatever, because that's more what people expect in both of those genres. But there's some wiggle room, obviously.
Okay.
But yeah, so I think it's about how produced it is sketch to short film.
Okay, interesting. And so then when you make a sketch or a short, and by the way, comedy is your target.
We only
audience.
Make comedies.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I'm curious, was Lolo, was that her big passion as well?
Yeah, back
comedy?
When she had her first YouTube channel, it was pretty much all comedy. It was all comedic. And our first 2 feature films are definitely comedic, but a little less comedic, I would say. And then after making Mr. Lee, we kind of decided that we wanted everything we made to be more positive and uplifting, kind of because, and we love that people love Mr. Lee and we love Mr. Lee, but if you watch it to the end, it kind of makes you feel not great. But we like leaving the theater feeling good, and we like other people feeling good. So after Mr. Lee, we kind of decided that we want it to be uplifting in some way.
Okay.
So that's what that's our current modus operandi, but we'll see if that.
So before we get to the feature films, because evidently you've done 6 of them.
Yeah.
And I saw Zoink and Mr. Lee.
Yeah.
Those are the 2 I watched. But before we get to that, when you make a sketch or a film short, which you've done a lot of these, are you always submitting those to a film festival somewhere? How is, I'm curious because I don't know your world very well at all. Maybe you give us a little 101 on how you put your material out there. How do you get it to an audience that you want to see it? So, obviously you've got your YouTube channel and you've got followers that pick you up, but I'm guessing that there's some type of distribution system out there for what you're doing. So
we started with just feature films, and we realized the downsides of feature films are they take a very long time to make and a lot of resources, and kind of between starting it and finishing it and then starting the next one, there's so much time in between there. And film festivals, like you mentioned, have more time to program short films. So there's a higher chance of a short film getting into a film festival. So after a couple of features and being like, man, I wish we'd put more stuff out for people to enjoy more year round. And I wish I had something that was more festival oriented. We decided to start making short films. And we've done some that are intended for festivals. We've done some that were just like, oh, this is a fun little joke we're going to put out on YouTube. And it really depends on what the film is, how we decide to put it out there. There isn't much of a distribution per se for a short film besides things like YouTube, or people use Vimeo sometimes, but that's more like filmmakers watch it than regular people watch there. We've got a pretty good following on Facebook where we post links so that you can go over to our YouTube. But it is kind of a YouTube based thing. And then some of them go to festivals and we find friends and audience members there. But it depends on short film to short film. In 2019, we challenged ourselves to make a short film every month. So we made 12 shorts in 2019, and we were going to keep it going through 2020 until everything shut down, and it made it much more difficult to make a film. Yeah. So that hasn't happened. We'll see. Maybe we'll get back there soon. Interesting. Who knows? Yeah. But
yeah. So I'm curious, how many film festivals are in America?
Oh my gosh.
Hundreds, thousands? Yeah. Every little city, everywhere?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, there's just off the top of my head, I'm guessing there's probably 6 or 7 just in the Kansas, Missouri drivable area. And then that scales up more and more the bigger the cities are. But yeah, I would say thousands to
everywhere.
a million.
Just everywhere. Yeah. And then so give us a little history on Kansas City's film festival. Or I know there might be more than one, but
so
I've every now, in the media, every now and then that gets attention. I've tried to jump in and follow it a little bit here and there, but not so. I haven't done that a lot.
So Kansas City has 2 festivals really that are in the main city area that are quite large, which is the KC International Film Festival, which used to be based at the Cinemark on the Plaza. And there's the Kansas International Film Festival. And then there's a bunch of other smaller ones, like the in Leavenworth, Kansas, does First City Film Festival, which is a wonderful festival. I highly recommend. If you're in Leavenworth or if you want to drive to it, it's totally worth it. They program great shorts. They do a great job producing that festival. There's the Kansas City Underground Film Festival that just started a couple of years ago, and it's really getting its legs as it keeps going. Emporia has a film festival now called No Coast Film Festival. Wichita has Tallgrass, which has been voted in Movie Maker magazine the top 50 film festivals in the country multiple times. Mulvane, Kansas, which is right outside of Wichita, has a really small festival called Doc Sunback that's amazing. So there's tons of them, and they all have their different niches and their different things that are. But I mean, I love film festivals.
Yeah, I've actually never intentionally gone to a film festival, but you become aware of like I know Robert Redford, and there's these huge
Sundance.
Ones. Yeah, Sundance. Yeah. I've watched a ton of films from like Sundance. I was in Park Cities one time.
Oh, really?
By accident, when a film festival there was going on.
Okay.
And that was kind of fascinating because there were movie stars walking around, and and like we're going, oh wow, this is cool, and I actually ended up attending. It's because I was like, oh, let's go to, and I've attended a film short there. I can't even remember the name of it or the title or anything, but actually was standing in a foyer with movie stars who were all. It was just kind of random,
Yeah, it's one of those things where you realize how quickly the 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon is real.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, no, that's a fun world for.
Yeah, and I definitely encourage anybody. KC Film Fest will be happening again in April, so I definitely recommend if people are.
And is it located? Where is there a central location for? Because I know a lot of times these film festivals will be showing films in, like one film festival will be showing films in 10 different locations or something like that, morning, noon, and night.
Depends on the festival and depends on things. Like I said, KC Film Fest used to be, because the Cinemark on the Plaza had like the 2 levels, It used to be like the top floor of the Cinemark on the Plaza. That location doesn't exist anymore. There isn't a Cinemark there anymore. In 2020, they were going to be in an AMC, and then that festival ended up getting canceled. 2021 they did all online. I don't know where 2022 is going to be yet, but I will be submitting, and hopefully I'll be screening there.
Yeah. And some of your sketches and shorts and even some of your features have garnered some attention at some of these film festivals. Why don't you talk about that a little bit? Brag about yourself a little bit. Yeah.
I would love to.
Yeah. Please.
So Mr. Lee showed, it was our first big festival screening, and it was our first big kind of feature getting out there was Mr. Lee, which was the second feature we ever made.
This came out 2018. Is that right? Roughly?
Sure. I'll agree. I'm bad at years.
I just watched it last night, so it's fresh on my mind. But
yeah, and it took a while to come out. We made it probably like 2013, 2014, I would say.
Okay.
And then 4 years after we'd done it, so it would be 2018, we'd kind of given up on it, and we thought like, oh, I guess that one's not going to get anywhere. And then it ended up getting invited to screen at the KC Film Fest local showcase, where it won Audience Choice Award. And then it ended up going to Doc Sunback Film Festival, where it won Audience Choice Award, and then it ended up getting on Amazon Prime. And we were like, oh my God. And people were all like we got really good responses, and people kept reaching out to us being like, oh my God, I love Mr. Lee. And I was like, I thought that movie was dead. Like, I thought it was gone. I thought nobody cared. And then from that, we were able to screen Zoink at a couple film festivals. We've had a short film called Silent But Deadly.
I saw it.
Yeah, okay.
I watched that one.
That one went to a handful of festivals and was runner-up for Audience Choice. We just got Audience Choice Award at Doc Sunback for a sketch called Interview Hype Man, which I don't know if you watched that one or not.
I didn't see that one.
Oh, man. That's
Interview
one that
Hype Man?
Yeah, Interview Hype Man.
Hype Man, okay.
So it's I don't know if you listen to a lot of rap music.
I do some.
Okay,
for sure, yeah.
So there's... in the rap scene, there is a job called the Hype Man, and DJ Khaled does it a lot, and Lil Wayne used to do it in songs a lot, where you'd hear a song and then they'd just be like, yeah, Lil Jon, he does it all the time.
Okay.
Where it's just the yeah, okay in the background of a song. Mm-hmm. So I was like, I love that element. What if there was a Hype Man in your regular life? So
that's good.
So we just did a sketch where it's a guy going to an interview and I play his hype man. So I just sit behind him, and while he does the interview for the job, I'm just yelling how great he is the whole time.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Fun. Yeah. So Mr. Lee, I just watched last night. So I just thought that was, so you've just won some Oscars, or your character has just won some Oscars. And so you go in to do this morning interview show, and the gal wants to get behind because there's this dark side to you that nobody really knows, that she's trying to dig out of you, and then all of a sudden the movie you come clean and you tell your dark story about how you wound up where you're at,
how I became famous.
Basically, you're a criminal, and you do tons of criminal things, which ends up bringing you to this place of winning Oscars.
Yeah,
and then the final thing was like she's kind of stunned at the end of this whole story of how criminal you are. This guy should be in jail, and she's going, so was it worth it? I thought and you're like, no. So, it's like the metaphor for how many rotten things do people have to do to get to this place? It's just kind of fascinating.
I think it came definitely out of a place of being very young-ish. We were 19, 20, 21 when we made that movie, and really feeling like it was nearly impossible to garner the fame or the just necessary eyes on to these projects that we were working on. And we're like, wouldn't it be funny if you held hostage a bunch of producers to get your movie made or something like that, or to get eyes on your movie? And we just kind of started throwing that around, and it ended up becoming that whole script. And
wow. So
I think it's a feeling that artists can really relate to.
I bet. I can imagine
that desire. But then also, as we were doing it, we were like, oh man, if you actually did this, you're kind of a bad person. You're kind of unlikable.
I know. It is funny. Are most of your writing collaborative?
Yeah.
Do you write? Tell us a little bit about your creative writing process.
So me and my wife write pretty much everything we've made together. Our first feature, Intermission, was written by her and another writer named Zachary Weaver. And some of our short films or sketches were written out of a artist's writer's room we created at one time, to just kind of bring comedic writers together, to pitch ideas, to throw ideas out there, to see to help each other get to be better writers. And then me and Lolo would pick scripts out of there and be like, hey, would you guys like it if we produce this film in a film format, so that you can kind of, once again, grow as a writer, to see what it's like to go from writing a script to seeing it acted out in front of you and filmed, and then fully produced, and what stays, learning that process of writing and how it changes. So that Cousin Eric's is on our YouTube. That was written out of that writer's room. Catcalls was. But me and Lolo write most things together. And our process, kind of, it comes out of just we love throwing ideas at each other, and we'll have a new idea and be like, oh, wouldn't it be funny if this thing happened? Or like, I've been thinking about like this is kind of a story idea, and then we'll flesh it out in conversation.
Do you have like a planned creative set, or is it just random stuff that happens through the day and then it just moves into conversation? Like, do you have a creative space that you work in?
No, yeah.
Okay,
we've got we have our office, which is a room in our home where we make most of this. It's where our computers are at.
Do you storyboard stuff?
We do.
Just curious, like, is there a physicality to your creative process, or is it just words, or is it ideas, and then
it's kind of ideas that turn into words and then slowly become more words and more words until they're final words, and then that all changes when you finally get it to filming. But we don't operate much in storyboards because but we're very connected in our thoughts. So I can be like, oh yeah, it'll be kind of a close up on this object, and generally Lolo knows what I am seeing in my head, so we don't even storyboard it out. We're like, yeah, it'll be close up, it'll be this wide shot, it'll be this shot, and we'll write out our shot list, so it's still words. And then we get on set, and sometimes we do get there and be like, well, in my head it looks different. And she's like, well, in my head it looks different than that. And I'm like, well, we need to figure this out. Yeah. But it's interesting. It's mostly words, and a lot of times it'll be, we will think of an idea, we'll break it down maybe into beats, like this is the first act beats. These are the points that have to happen. Don't know how we get to here to here to here, but these are the points we have to hit. This is second act, this is third act, and we have those beats.
Okay.
And then Lolo is incredible at just cranking out a script. She's so good at turning off that editor brain, and she's able to just be like, all right, let's just write it. Oh, that doesn't work. Who cares? Just keep writing. And she'll just write through it. And then I kind of come in and I'll edit it down. I'll give notes. We discuss notes. We'll cut it down there. I'll maybe go in and like rewrite it. And then she'll be like, all of your rewrites are bad. Let me rewrite it. I'm like, great, your rewrites are bad. And then we do that for many, many phases of rewrites until we're both happy. And then we get on set, and we're still like, no, that line doesn't sound good coming out of that actor. Let's rewrite that bit too. And so things change.
Interesting.
On set even.
Yeah. I'm going to take a little rabbit trail here just for a second. But some of my listeners may be from Vineyard Church, which was the church I pastored for 28 years.
Yeah.
And there was a season when I had a guy in my church named Randy Tennyson, who performed at the Improv all the time down in Westport. Remember when the Improv, where I don't know if it was Westport or River Market, I think. I'm talking like 15, 20 years ago.
I think the Improv's down in Westport.
Okay. Anyway, he performed regularly improv comedy.
Okay.
And we decided to start making funny pastor, what you would call shorts, I guess.
Okay.
But super short, 2, 3, 4 minute little, like Pastor Fred doing stupid things.
Okay.
Or in the city or around, it could have been Pastor Fred's day off, or, and just me doing stupid stuff. But so I worked with him. We'd come up with crazy, funny ideas, just to put me outside the pastor box.
Are these still viewable? Because I want to watch them.
Yeah, so you can see them, and they're super corny.
Okay.
But people loved them. And he storyboarded everything. So like we'd come up with a creative, funny idea, and then we would storyboard these things. And it could be like, like we were trying to recruit greeters one time to help greet people because our church was growing. And so we came up with this one called The Church Without Greeters. And it's like this dark horror, like comedy about walking in and
shot like the Twilight.
Yeah, we shot.
That's
like
awesome.
The Twilight Zone. This Randy Tennyson. He lives in Florida now. He moved away, and so it ended this really fun, creative world that I was in for a while. Because then we never had anybody replace him, But it was so funny. I'll have to make sure Randy listens to this episode because. But yeah, I'll have. They're still floating around out there on YouTube.
That's one of those fun things about YouTube is that like when you make it, it kind of just is there forever.
Yeah, yeah. I think one of our most viewed one was Fred and Randy's Day Off. But when I hired a new worship leader, he had a big creative background with Phil Keggy and some really famous musicians, and then we just did a bunch of comedy routines off of anything we could come up with.
So you do know comedy filmmaking?
Well, I love it. and I even, tried to act in some of these things,
Yeah.
which I was terrible, right? But it made it all the more fun, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, so Zoink. I watched Zoink.
Yeah.
And it's on Prime right now.
It is on Amazon Prime.
And it was so funny because I always try to figure out deeper meanings and things, So I'm thinking like, here's the younger brother who's an alien, and then you have the teacher who gives you too much homework.
Yep.
And he's pure evil.
He is.
And
He's the worst.
And he turns into goo. And I'm just thinking, this is an adolescent dream, like to be able to make a film about your little brother and your most hated teacher or something like that.
It really was. And it was an absolute joy to make a children's comedy. I loved it. I love movies like, I love Goosebumps. I love Ghostbusters. I love Spy Kids. Like, I love that like genre kind of like this, like, not kid comedy, but like, yeah, like these kid comedies with like weird sci-fi. Like
Super 8. I mean, that's
I haven't seen it, but yes.
Dude, you got to see.
I need to watch Super 8.
To me, like Super 8 was kind of like, I don't know, a Goonies meets, high-end Spielberg sci-fi. Yeah. But maybe with a little bit Stand By Me mixed in there too. You know what I mean?
I love Spielberg movies. So like that's a lot of the inspiration of Zoink. That, and then like we had the kids, because two of the main kids
even
are
Stranger Things to a degree.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like these kids just like they're just experiencing life.
And because like everyone relates to being a kid in different ways, and all those feelings of being a child. And I think watching a child's story is vastly relatable. I don't know.
Who did the music on Zoink?
Zoink's composed by Alex Ellis.
Yeah. Is he a local guy?
He was a local musician and composer. He has since moved on and is working out in LA, I think, for some big Universal music group or something like that. That could be wrong, but
who did the music on Mr. Lee?
Mr. Lee
had a pretty big music score on it, if I remember right.
All of those are free to use Incompetech tracks.
Ah, okay.
Which is what we did for a lot of our stuff in the early days, and still do for some of our short films, depending on the scale and budget of what we want to put into it.
Okay.
Because Incompetech's a wonderful resource for filmmakers. He's got all of this royalty-free Creative Commons music that, as long as you credit it in your credits correctly, you can use it for either free or donation to him. And it's great music. Like, I mean, the fact that you asked who composed it, technically nobody except for Lolo is great at cutting music together and kind of figuring out how a track will fit within a scene. So
yeah, I always like. I'm always drawn to music. I have some of my favorite.
And like, I love working with Alex Ellis. He composed Zoink. He did the composition for Silent but Deadly. Okay. And he just finished up working on our newest feature, Almost Sorta Maybe, that'll hopefully be coming soon. So we've worked with Alex a lot.
New feature film coming out, right?
We do.
Next year?
Hopefully 2022. It'll be.
What's its title?
Almost Sorta Maybe.
Almost Sorta Maybe. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I want to get to two things here before we finish up here. But one, I'm kind of curious about your spiritual journey and your creative process, and do those two worlds mix together at all? I'm just kind of interested in. Yeah, this is our spirituality adventures. I'm always looking for angles, and I think about spirituality as connection to self, to others, and to something greater than us that's loving and caring. So for me, music and filming and all is such a creative process, and the inspiration for that usually has some kind of spiritual core to it.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely creative and collaborative. Yeah. Because you can't make a film without an army of people, it seems like.
So the community that gets created,
it's a family. In a lot of ways. I grew up Catholic, like I said. I am very ambiguous at this point, spiritually, I guess. But
was that a positive or negative in your life, the Catholic thing? because like I was interviewing, who was it, Matt, that was the Get Up? No, what band was that? God, that I was interviewing, the guy that Nate Shea played with.
Oh, yeah, you're talking to Matt Pryor from the Get Up Kids.
Yeah, Matt Pryor from the Get Up Kids. He grew up Catholic, and like it was like 100% negative for him. Like it turned him off to religion, kind of a thing.
I don't think I had that experience.
Yeah.
I think that there are a lot of positives that I got from my experiences, but I acknowledge the negatives that other people have gotten and the negative experiences other people have had. And I even acknowledge the small things that it has given me that aren't positive. I'm able to kind of look at it in all of those ways. And I do think that as I grow up, I wonder how we can garner all of the positives that I did receive without keeping the negative. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I don't have that answer because I'm just a young, dumb artist, but I think about it often and wonder, and I am grateful for a lot of the things that I was given. Yeah. And then other times I'm like, this Catholic guilt that is always joked about, or like there's different things that are somehow bred into all of it that don't garner positive results. I wonder how we can
I'm on that journey even now after all these years, to like how can we take the best of these religious traditions and our faith backgrounds and different things like that, and move into the most positive version of that.
Right? And I think about it a lot as like my sister has kids and my friends are having kids, and I'm like, how can we raise this next generation in a way that keeps positive things, but we don't have to give them all this negative stuff or all this this baggage, all this garbage with it. I don't know the answer.
I've interviewed a lot of people who've gone through religious trauma, like a Matt Pryor, but other people who experienced harm from their religious background or tradition, and some just excessive guilt, and then some, I think, sometimes I wonder, like Catholics and Southern Baptists seem to be the most guilt-ridden people in America. And then, is that just because there's more of them? And were all the traditions guilt-producing that way and shame-producing, I've kind of gotten to where shame-based anything for me is like let's don't go there. Let's have grace-based everything, and I, those are things that I value.
I definitely agree. I definitely think in similar ways, and like it's kind of why I think me and Lolo have edged towards like we want positivity in our content. And it is definitely something, as a person, you were saying that you always look for the deeper meanings in things. Me and Lolo always discuss like, what is this piece of art saying? Like even in The Five Came Back, the book I'm reading right now, one of the directors talks about how at a point in his life right before World War II, he realized all film is propaganda.
Yes.
So every story you tell does have an angle in some way. And so I think as a creative, it's important to know that what you are saying with your film. And I do want it to be positive. I want it to be uplifting. I want you to take away something that is meaningful to you that doesn't harm you.
Interesting.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I love that.
So I think that's a lot of my goals in my film. And I think that's where my spirituality is in teaching through creating and then also being collaborative in what I create.
That's wonderful. I like that. Very cool. So I had a lot of fun listening to your, because I want to dive into the podcast.
Yeah,
and the
definitely.
most recent, the Indies on Indie was really interesting. I jumped on a few of those, and then this First Timers Movie Club.
Yeah.
So you and Lolo have watched so many films.
I've seen a lot of them.
More than me. And I've watched a lot, and I'm way older than you, right? But I still think you've probably watched more. And then at the same time, what you're doing is you're finding like almost like classic or iconic films that one of the two of you haven't seen.
Yes. And showing them it for the first time.
Yeah. And so then either you or Lolo watch a film that you've never seen before, and then so you have a little bit of leading into it, you watch it, and then you come out of it and you share your immediate reactions.
Yes.
And it's really fun. And
Thank you.
Just for the audience, it's like going to film school to some degree on that particular movie that you're dealing with. So I love Breakfast at Tiffany's.
Okay.
I've owned that. I've probably watched it 20 times. I always encourage people to watch it, even young people.
Yeah.
Because to me, and I love films that have like dark, but then a redemptive moment to it.
Yeah.
Those are some of my favorites. And so Breakfast at Tiffany, like you watched that for the first time.
I did.
Lolo had only seen it once.
Yeah.
But she had grown to love it more the older she got, even though she didn't review it until this moment. And it has, and you were like going sad when you came out of that. And I was like, but that redemptive thread at the moment when the two sort of broken people.
Yeah.
And so like this recovery theme for me, like broken
it
people
definitely
heal
has
broken
that.
people.
Yeah.
And then you have these two characters that are very broken, but they find each other in it. And that's the redemptive note. It's like,
you're right.
But then it's got the racism in it because it's a 1961. So I was born in 1961. That film came out in 1961. And, like I'd watched that so many times and never thought about
that character,
the Asian Mickey Rooney character.
Yeah.
Is that right? Mickey Rooney?
Yes.
The guy that plays the and the inherent racism in that and all. And then I didn't realize that had become like an iconic film to watch on how racism works in filmmaking. And I'm like, going, dang, I learned more about this film just listening to that episode, and it's one of my favorites than I had. So now I want to go back and pick more of my favorite films and listen to you guys talk about it, because you really do a deep dive.
Thank you.
On the film. Yeah, I mean, like I said, from the directors to the music to the actors to the themes to all of that.
I think the goal personally is to learn from these films that have such a following or have such like an iconic spot in film history, and to learn like, what is it that makes these films so great? And why do you go back to Breakfast at Tiffany's 100 times and watch it and go, wow, that gives me this feeling? Because it is technique. There's a technique to filmmaking, and when done right, you get something like Citizen Kane, you get Titanic, you get Breakfast at Tiffany's. And when it's done wrong, you might not be able to put your finger on it, but as an audience member, you go, yeah, I watched that. Or you might forget, like, oh, I think I saw that movie. But like, you saw Breakfast at Tiffany's. If you've seen Citizen Kane. Like, those are movies that stick with you. And it's because of the technique, and it's because generally the technique, but also all these small things that everyone's doing to their best ability. Like we just talked about Jurassic Park on the podcast. And it's all these things that had never been done before, but people believed they could do it, and they tried their hardest, and they created stuff that blew audiences away because they were committed and they all loved it and they had a passion for their craft, It's
good stuff. My brain is just like, movies, I love movies. Yeah. And I love stories. So I love doing this podcast because I love hearing people's stories. I love hearing your story. Yeah. And so to me, good movie making is just good storytelling. Exactly. And I'm always, there's always something about somebody's story that I love and I benefit out of. And like, I'm not a film critic. I've never filmed any, I've gone through, like, I'll have a director that I love. Yeah. And then I'll just watch everything that director's ever done.
Who is it for you? Can you name someone? I don't want to put you on the spot.
And these aren't like, it's not the indie world that you're from, right? Yeah. But like the Coen brothers, Wes Anderson. Who's the former Monty Python guy that did 12 Monkeys?
Terry Gilliam. I love Terry Gilliam.
Gilliam's one of my guys.
Oh, man.
And I'll just run through, directors like that, and I'll tend to, Quentin Tarantino, obviously, is you can't miss him, but and then but then I went back with the the Academy and all the best films that have ever been won. I went way back to the beginning and went through and watched all of those.
Wow.
You know, and I would.
That's a pretty deep dive.
So I've done stuff
a lot of years.
like that. Yeah. So I've done a lot of film watching myself, but not with the expertise that you and Lolo have. And so I loved listening to the episodes because it took it even deeper than I've ever gone.
That's the goal of each episode, is to go really just like dissect these movies that people love and dissect why we love them and what filmmaking techniques were used to make them so lovable, but also who was involved. Because sometimes you don't even think about those people in the background that created something that had never been seen before. Mm-hmm. Like the past 2 episodes, we talked a lot about the cinematographer Dean Cundy, who did the cinematography for both Death Becomes Her and Jurassic Park, and a bunch of other films that have such beautiful visuals and such beautiful effects that you don't even think about them. You're like, oh, that's just a person who has a hole through them in Death Becomes Her. Oh, that's just a dinosaur. But like, they feel real because he shot them in a way that makes them feel real, and he knows how to use his camera so beautifully. And nobody talks about cinematographers.
Yeah, and that's a part of it that I love, because there's so many elements that go into great filmmaking, right?
Yeah.
And some of them get almost zero attention.
And that's like why I love filmmaking, is because it's so many beautiful art forms that all have to come together, because it's storytelling, which is the basis of, I think, all human interaction is storytelling. So at the core of it, it's storytelling, which is beautiful. It's writing. You've got a director who's once again a storyteller, but you also have actors. You've got the camera department. You have electricians. Like, it takes all of this very crazy technical equipment to make it happen. It's editing. And back when it was film editing, it's even more magical to me. Like, the actual film might as well be magic. It really is such a cool experience. And I've been working on a couple films recently that are shot on film. And while doing it, it just blows my mind that that's how movies were made for 100 years.
Yeah.
And then it's an editor and it's painters to paint like matte paintings, like so much of Superman with, I just lost his name. Christopher Reeve, the Christopher Reeve Superman. So much of that movie has these beautiful matte paintings, and Star Wars has all these beautiful matte paintings that you don't even notice. You just think, oh, that's the Death Star. Oh, that's 100 stormtroopers standing next to the thing where the Emperor's coming in. Like, no, most of those stormtroopers are painted. There's only a couple of rows of real people. And you never think about that. The Fortress of Solitude, it's all a painting. That's beautiful art at its best. Effects artists, those are artists. It's so many artists coming together to create something that is just almost taken for granted. Like, every episode of television is hundreds of people that works together to create that episode of TV, and you're like, oh, it was fine, and you're like, put it in the background. But no, that's beautiful. That's art. It's story. I love it.
Good stuff. Well, just for our audience, because we could go on forever. I could run really forever on this, but like, what are like some movies that maybe you've seen out of your ones that you've done now on the First Timer Movie Club? What are 2 or 3 movies like you would want to say to this audience, like, go out and if you've never seen this movie, watch this? And then what are a couple of your most favorite series that you think that the audience should watch? So just make a few recommendations for us. So one of the first episodes we did for First Timers Movie Club was Edward Scissorhands. And it's because it really is one of my favorite movies. I love that movie so much. And so I was so happy to finally show it to Lolo, who I've been trying to show it to for forever. That's one way to get her to watch a movie you want her to see. That's kind of the beauty of the podcast, is me and my wife are like, hey, it's been 10 years and you haven't seen this movie that's my favorite. We're watching it now. That's funny. Can't have your phone out. Like, that's hilarious. But I love that film. A movie I hadn't seen before that I've kind of fallen in love with is Titanic. I really do. I think it's amazing and interesting. It's just the storytelling of it is beautiful. Who directed Edward Scissorhands? Tim Burton. Okay, and then who did Titanic?
It's James Cameron.
James Cameron, yeah.
Yeah. Which, like, he also did Terminator 1 and 2, which is incredible and so different than Titanic. Yeah. But, like, Burton has a style that you're like, oh, if you like Burton, you're going to like a Burton movie pretty much.
Yeah, Tim Burton is so interesting.
He's got
he likes Johnny Depp too, doesn't he? Yeah.
They work together a lot. He's got his crew of people, and they do a certain thing, but so does like a Wes Anderson. He's got his crew that you're like, I'm going to see those people in this movie.
Do you like Wes Anderson?
I do. I'm not like as knowledgeble about Wes Anderson as I should be, but I do. I love his style because it's so distinctly Wes Anderson.
So offbeat, dark humor.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff.
And the cinematography of it is so precise. It's so thought out. It's so planned. And then, like, I love Edgar Wright. He's another director I'm really into.
What would I know of him?
Baby Driver is probably like one of his big.
Yeah, I haven't seen that.
Last Night in Soho just came out, which I haven't seen yet.
I haven't seen that.
But the three that most people know is he did what's called the Coronado trilogy, which is Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, and At World's End.
Okay, I've seen two of those.
Okay, yeah.
I've seen Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz.
Me too. I actually haven't seen At World's End either. But like his style and the way he like moves the camera and just the way the edits go, or you're like, oh, that's how Edgar Wright makes a movie, and I really love it. Like, we did a short film called Everybody Does It, and the edits in that film are 100% just an homage to Edgar Wright. Like, that's what I wanted to do in that movie, and Lolo was with me, and we were like, this is how we're doing it, and it's edited to feel like that.
Yeah.
And
what about any series that you would like go, God, don't miss this of late?
I mean,
even some of the streaming stuff.
Yeah, I watched so much television. Like, I loved Game of Thrones just like everybody else.
I haven't seen that.
Really?
Yeah, I've been afraid to get into it because I thought I'll never resurface.
Yeah. I'm also the nerd that, like, I love the books. So the books are incredible. And as a reader, I think you should read them. They don't get to end yet, but
yeah. Did you watch what's the gal that during the pandemic came out that was the girl that grew up in an orphanage, got addicted to Xanax and alcohol? She was a chess player. Oh,
Queen's Gambit. I have not checked it out yet.
Wow. I loved that.
I need to.
Yeah.
I think that was
probably my favorite of the pandemic era, was Queen's Gambit.
It's so interesting to me with the binging shows like Queen's Gambit that everyone's like, oh, I watched it all in a weekend. And then people are like, yeah, but like 2 hours for a movie, that's kind of a commitment. It is funny how people are more willing to be like, I'll watch 10 hours of TV over the course of 2 evenings. And it's like, you're watching 5 hours each. You could watch 4 movies in that time.
Yeah.
But so, like, I don't watch all those streaming shows or like just those like big series as often as like I feel like a lot of the people do, because I tried Breaking Bad and I'm like, oh, I get it. I love this series. I love what I've seen. I don't need to watch every season. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't stick with things long enough for TV a lot of the time.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, it is. I do think, don't you think the pandemic will have some lasting impact on the movie film world? Do you think? What do you think?
I think it may. I think it definitely is. What I hope happens, I guess, personally, is I hope people realized the importance of the art and the storytelling and how much they really loved it. And I hope as cinemas and theaters open, people go to the Screenland Armor and think of it as an event and as a thing to go. It's a thing to go do. It's people used to get dressed up to go do it. Like it's an event. It's not just like, oh, I guess we could go see a movie. You're going to the theater. Like it's so I hope that mentality changes. I hope people appreciate the people that make these things. And I also think that it may give rise to some smaller stories that we may not have seen previously, because as films get more and more expensive to make, maybe they'll start making stories that are less and less expensive and a little more pared down because they're now going on streaming or they're now going to the cinema, but they're not staying there necessarily as long, or
Yeah.
Things like that.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll see more weird stuff, and more weird stuff will get more attention.
Yeah. It was interesting, but man, I mean, like, I didn't go to a movie for over a year,
Same.
and I still hardly am back to the theater again.
It's still a big decision.
Yeah.
Whenever I go to the theater, I'm like, oh, is it worth the the work and the worry of, do we wear a mask? Do we not wear? Like, how many people in this room might be vaccinated or not? Like, there's so many things in the back of your head that, like, kind of unfortunately take away from the experience of how much I do love going to the movies. I really love it.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on Spirituality Adventures. This has been fun. I could talk another 2 hours with you about movies, but I want to encourage our listeners to check out your YouTube, IX Production. Yeah. And lots of content there. And then the current podcast that you're doing is brilliant. I love it. First Timers Movie Club. Yeah, if you love movies, go give it a Patrick listen. And his wife Lolo, and you can even just roll through there and pick one of your favorite movies and listen to them. And I promise you will get educated and have a new appreciation for even some of your most favorite films. So thanks for what you do, and thanks for coming on Spirituality Adventures. And thanks everybody for listening. We'll see you next time. This concludes today's episode. Thanks for tuning in and listening. Remember, if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Remember to like, share, or subscribe to the social media platform that you're using. And then go to our website, spiritualityadventures.com, and make a one-time donation, or you can subscribe monthly and receive our special bonus content. Thanks so much.